Some of the kindest people you know are the cruelest to themselves. They'll forgive a friend who forgets their birthday. They'll forgive a stranger who cuts them off in traffic. They'll even forgive people who've hurt them badly, more than once. But there's one name on their list that never seems to make the cut. You already know who that is. Maybe it was something you said. Something you didn't do. A version of yourself you can't quite forgive for existing. Here's the strange part, you don't even think the guilt is helping anymore. You just don't know how to put it down. Stay with me. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly why your mind won't let this go, and what it actually takes to finally set it down. Let's start with a distinction that changes everything. Shame researcher Brené Brown spent years studying the difference between guilt and shame, and it's more important than it sounds. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am something bad. Guilt points at a behavior, and behaviors can change. Shame points at your whole identity, and identity feels impossible to fix. Most people who can't forgive themselves aren't stuck in guilt anymore. Somewhere along the way, without noticing, I made a mistake, quietly became, I am the mistake. Psychologist Carl Rogers had a theory for why this feels so dangerous. He believed many of us grow up absorbing conditions of worth, an invisible rulebook that says we're only lovable when we behave a certain way. When you break one of those rules, even in private, even years ago, part of you still believes you broke the terms of your own acceptance. So forgiving yourself doesn't feel like forgiving a mistake, it feels like re-earning the right to exist as you are. Add perfectionism, and the trap tightens. It doesn't just want you to do well, it wants you to have never needed to try. It promises that flawlessness equals safety. Guilt, in that framework, isn't proof you're human. It's proof the system failed. And underneath most of it sits one quiet fear nobody says out loud: if I forgive myself, does that mean I'm the kind of person who could do it again? Keep that fear in mind. We'll come back to it. Let's make this concrete. Let's call her Maya. She spent 3 years preparing for an exam her parents had quietly built their hopes around. She missed the cutoff by 4 points. Her parents told her they were proud of her anyway. She has never once believed them. In her mind, she didn't just miss a score, she confirmed something she'd feared about herself all along. Years later, Maya is doing well by almost any outside measure. She still flinches at performance reviews, at anything resembling being ranked. The exam ended. The verdict, in her mind, never did. That's the thing about unforgiven moments. They don't stay in the past. They get promoted to identity, and then they follow you everywhere. Long before psychology had names for any of this, philosophers were already circling the same wound. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, built a philosophy around one radical idea: it's rarely the event itself that torments us. It's the judgment we layer on top of it, long after the moment has passed. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire and still sitting down most nights to interrogate his own thinking, understood that the mind can become its own prison guard, not because the past demands punishment, but because we've confused punishment with responsibility. They aren't the same thing. Responsibility looks forward. Punishment only looks back. Epictetus, born into slavery and later one of Rome's most influential teachers, put it even more directly: it's rarely the thing itself that disturbs us, but the meaning we insist on attaching to it. You cannot rewrite what happened. You can only choose what it's allowed to mean about you now. Aristotle offers something gentler. He believed character isn't something you either have or don't, it's built the way a craftsman builds anything, through repetition. A single action, however painful, was never meant to be your permanent verdict. It's one brick, not the whole wall. On the other side of the world, Buddhist teaching tells a parable that lands in nearly the same place. Pain is inevitable, that's the first arrow, and no one escapes it. But suffering is often a second arrow, one we fire at ourselves, again and again, long after the first has already landed. Self-forgiveness isn't pretending the first arrow never hit. It's finally lowering the bow. Nietzsche pushed further still, with an idea he called a more fatty love of one's fate. Not resignation, not pretending the past didn't hurt, but a willingness to say, this happened, this is mine, and I won't spend the rest of my life at war with a chapter that's already closed. None of these thinkers ever met. Separated by centuries and continents, they arrived at the same quiet conclusion: the past isn't something you defeat. It's something you finally stop fighting. Here's something that might make you feel a little less broken. your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do. Psychologists call it negativity bias, the tendency to register painful experiences far more vividly than neutral or positive ones. In a world where one wrong move could end you, a mind that remembers pain sharply kept your ancestors alive. The problem is that wiring can't tell the difference between "a predator is near" and "I said the wrong thing at dinner 3 years ago." To your nervous system, both can register as danger worth remembering. This is where rumination comes in, replaying a painful memory on a loop, searching for an ending that will never arrive. It feels productive, like solving something. Neurologically, you're mostly just reopening the wound and calling it problem solving. Here's the twist neuroscience adds: every time you replay a memory, your brain doesn't retrieve a fixed recording. It quietly rebuilds the memory from scratch, and if you rebuild it in a harsh, self-critical voice often enough, that harshness becomes part of the memory itself. You're not just remembering the mistake, you're reauthoring it to be worse. There's a man, let's call him Dev, who has replayed the same phone call for 6 years. His mother left him a voicemail on a Tuesday night. He told himself he'd call her back in the morning. He never got the chance. Nothing he did caused what happened next. He knows this, logically. But logic was never really the problem. His mind isn't trying to solve anything anymore. It's trying to feel, just once more, like it's still possible to go back and choose differently. That's rumination's cruelest trick. It disguises itself as responsibility, when really, it's often just grief, wearing guilt's clothing. And here's the part almost no one tells you: your inner critic likely isn't trying to destroy you. Somewhere along the way, it got recruited as a bodyguard, convinced that if it punished you first, hard enough, nothing on the outside could ever hurt you worse. It's an exhausting job. And it's one you never actually asked it to take. That exhausted bodyguard is still waiting for permission to stand down. So if forgiving yourself isn't about pretending nothing happened, what is it actually about? Here's the distinction that changes everything: self-forgiveness isn't the erasure of an event. It's a shift in your relationship to that event, from prosecutor to witness. From someone still trying the case, to someone who's finally read the verdict and is ready to walk out of the courtroom. There's a woman, let's call her Ren, who, during an argument with her sister 4 years ago, said something about their father she can never take back. Her sister forgave her within a year. Ren has not forgiven herself once. For years, Ren believed holding on to guilt was a form of loyalty, proof she took what she did seriously. But guilt was never protecting that relationship. It was protecting Ren from having to trust herself again. Real accountability doesn't look like years of private punishment. It looks like 3 unglamorous things: understanding why you did what you did, actually changing the pattern that led there, and, wherever it's possible and welcomed, repairing what you can. That's the whole formula. Not forgetting, not pretending. Understand, change, repair. And when repair isn't possible, because someone's gone, or the door has closed, there's a fourth, quieter step: done alone. Let it become something you learned, instead of something you owe. This is usually the moment people expect to feel free. Some do. But for most, something stranger happens first, something almost no one warns you about. Here's the strange part: almost no one tells you about carrying guilt for years. Eventually, it stops feeling like pain. It starts feeling like home. When you've spent long enough believing you don't deserve good things, your nervous system starts treating good things as suspicious. Success feels like it's waiting to be taken back. Love feels like a mistake someone hasn't noticed yet. So, quietly, without deciding to, you start sabotaging the things you wanted. There's someone, let's call him Arjun, who dropped out of a program he was genuinely good at, 6 months before finishing. Looking back now, he can see it clearly. Some part of him had already decided, years earlier, after one badly handled mistake in his first job, that he wasn't the kind of person who gets to finish things. So he made sure he didn't. This is how guilt becomes identity, not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small decisions to play smaller, try less, want less, because wanting feels dangerous once you've quietly decided you don't deserve to receive. It shows up as anxiety with no clear cause. As perfectionism that isn't really about excellence, but about never being caught being imperfect again. As burnout, from working twice as hard to silence a voice that was never going to be satisfied. And it shows up in relationships, in flinching from closeness, because somewhere underneath, you've come to believe anyone who really saw you would eventually see the thing you can't forgive, and leave. The tragic irony is this: the guilt you've carried to prove you're a good person has slowly become the very thing stopping you from living like one. So how do you actually put this down, after years of carrying it? Not all at once. Not with a single decision made at 2 a.m. that resolves everything by morning. It happens the way most real change happens, in small, repeatable moments. One of the most effective is almost embarrassingly simple: write the thing down, then write it again, this time in the voice you'd use for a friend who came to you with the exact same story. The moment you separate the event from the internal monologue attached to it, you can finally see which one is true, and which one is just old and loud. Self-compassion researcher Kristin Neff found something counterintuitive: people who treat themselves with more kindness after failure don't become complacent. They tend to try again sooner, and try harder, than people who punish themselves. Self-compassion isn't the absence of standards. It's what makes it safe enough to keep having them. There's also a quieter practice worth naming: catching the sentence before it finishes. The moment "I can't believe I did that" starts turning into "I'm a terrible person," pause there. That gap is where the actual choice lives. None of this requires you to feel differently right away. Mindfulness research points to something simpler first: just noticing the guilt as a passing mental event, rather than a fact about who you are. "I'm having the thought that I'm a bad person" is a very different sentence than "I am a bad person," even though, in the moment, they can feel identical. For what can't be undone, the door that's closed, the person who's gone, there's a kind of acceptance that isn't the same as giving up. It's setting down a weight you were never strong enough to carry alone in the first place, because no one is. Where amends are possible and welcomed, make them, not to earn forgiveness, but because it's the honest, grown-up thing to do. Where they're not, direct that same energy inward, and become, in your daily choices, the answer to the question your guilt has been asking all along. Let's go back to the beginning, to the version of you sitting alone in that dim room. Here's what's true, whether you're ready to believe it yet or not: the person who made that mistake, who said that thing, who missed that chance, that version of you was working with less information, less healing, less of whatever you've since learned the hard way. You've been sentencing someone who doesn't exist anymore, for a crime committed by someone who no longer has the power to do it again. Forgiving yourself was never about deciding the past didn't matter. It mattered enough to change you. That's the whole point. That's the proof the sentence has already been served. You don't owe anyone, including yourself, an infinite sentence for a finite mistake. So tonight, or whenever this finds you, at 2 a.m., or in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, put it down. Not because you've forgotten. Because you've finally understood. You were never meant to carry this forever. You were only ever meant to carry it long enough to learn what it came to teach you. And maybe that's the real definition of forgiveness: not forgetting who you were, but finally being willing to meet who you've become.